They took my money, my food, my roof. Everything I gave them came from my heart. And yet one evening, they looked me straight in the eye and called me a parasite. My own family. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Instead, I began planning the kind of revenge they would never forget. My name is Margaret, and I am 78 years old. I never thought that at this stage of life, after giving everything I had to my family, I'd be sitting here, telling you how betrayal burns more than any fire. It all began after my husband Henry passed away 3 years ago. We built a small life together, a modest 2-story house in Indiana, filled with laughter, photographs, and the smell of his Sunday pancakes. After he was gone, the house felt like a hollow chest, and I was desperate to keep family close, to fill the silence with love. That's when my youngest son, Daniel, and his wife Brittany, suggested moving in with me. They had 2 kids, and at first, it sounded like a blessing. I would have noise, company, and purpose again. I imagined baking cookies with the children, watching them play in the yard where Daniel once ran barefoot, his blonde hair catching the sun. I said yes immediately, not knowing I was opening the door to my own humiliation. At first, things were fine. I offered to cover groceries, just until you both get settled, I told them. Then came the bills. Electricity, gas, water. They claimed times were hard, and of course I paid. I had Henry's pension and some savings, and what good is money if not to help your family? Soon I was covering car repairs, Brittany's salon appointments, even the kids' sports fees. They called me a lifesaver, and I smiled, proud that I could keep everyone afloat. But over time, their gratitude faded into expectation. Daniel stopped asking and started leaving bills on the counter like they belonged to me. Brittany grew sharper, her tone dripping with entitlement whenever she spoke. I remember one morning she waved her nails, freshly painted coral pink, and said, "You don't mind paying for these, right? After all, we're one family." I wanted to believe this was temporary, that they were just struggling. But months turned into years. My bank account grew thinner, yet their demands grew bolder. I stopped buying myself new clothes. I even skipped my arthritis medication sometimes, so I wouldn't feel like a burden to them. The children, sweet at first, began to mimic their parents. "Grandma, buy me this," they'd whine, tossing aside the toys I'd given them the week before. I laughed it off, but inside, a storm was brewing. Still, I kept quiet, clinging to the hope that love would win. Until one night, the night everything shattered. It was a Thursday evening. I had spent the whole day cooking. My arthritis made every chop, every stir a challenge, but I wanted to prepare a warm meal for them, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, cornbread, and Henry's favorite apple pie. I set the table with care, polished the silverware, and even lit a candle in the center. When Daniel and Brittany came in, they barely looked at me. Daniel dropped his jacket on the chair, scrolling through his phone. Brittany sniffed the air and said, "Roast again? Don't you know how to cook anything else?" My hands trembled, but I forced a smile. "It's your father's recipe. I thought it might." Yeah, Daniel cut me off. "Let's just eat." The kids shuffled in, grumbling about wanting pizza instead. I served them all, my heart pounding as I prayed they'd appreciate just a little effort. They ate without a thank you. Brittany pushed the carrots aside, the kids picked at their plates, and Daniel barely looked up from his phone. Then halfway through, Brittany slammed her fork down. "You know what's funny?" she sneered. "You live here, but you don't actually contribute anything." My breath caught. I stared at her, not sure I'd heard right. Daniel laughed bitterly. "She's right, Ma. We pay for everything, the mortgage, the utilities, the food. You just sit here. Honestly, sometimes it feels like you're a parasite." The word hit me like a slap. Parasite. After all I'd given. After draining my savings, after skipping my own medicine so they could have more, parasite. I couldn't move. My fork hovered over my plate, my heart pounding in my ears. The children giggled, repeating the word. Parasite. Parasite. They sang, like it was a game. My hands began to shake so violently that I had to set the fork down. My vision blurred with tears, but I refused to let them fall in front of them. I swallowed, my throat raw, and whispered, "Excuse me." I stood up, my knees aching, and walked to my bedroom, closing the door quietly behind me. Inside, I pressed my back to the wall and covered my mouth to stifle a sob. Parasite. The word echoed through my chest. My breathing was shallow, my hands trembling against my lips. For hours, I sat there in the dark, staring at Henry's photograph on the dresser. His smile, frozen in time, seemed to whisper, "You don't deserve this." And he was right. Something inside me shifted that night. Betrayal has a way of breaking you open, but it also hardens what remains. They had taken everything from me, my money, my dignity, my peace. But they had made one fatal mistake. They forgot whose name was on the deed to this house. And as I sat there in silence, a plan began to form. A plan that would make them regret the day they ever called me a parasite. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes. My pillow was damp from tears I hadn't even realized had slipped out while I dozed. My body ached from more than arthritis, it was the ache of humiliation. Parasite. The word still hung in the air like smoke after a fire. I shuffled into the kitchen, clutching my robe tighter around me. Daniel was already gone for work. Brittany stood at the counter, sipping coffee from the mug I'd bought her last Christmas. She didn't even glance up when I entered. On the table, I saw a crumpled utility bill with my name scrawled across it in Daniel's handwriting. No please. No thank you. Just expectation. I looked at the numbers. $412. My stomach tightened. Brittany caught my glance and smirked. Better get that handled, Margaret. Don't want the lights to go out, do we? I wanted to scream, to tell her I had handled everything for years, that she had no right to look at me like some freeloader. But I didn't. Instead, I nodded, slid the bill toward me, and tucked it under my arm. Quiet. Calm. That was how I'd get my revenge. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, as usual. Dusting, scrubbing, folding their laundry. But my mind wasn't on chores. It was racing, planning. If they wanted to see me as a parasite, then I would show them who truly depended on whom. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. Mr. Clay had handled Henry's affairs when he passed. His voice was warm, steady. Margaret, what can I do for you? I want to make some changes, I said, my voice low. About the house. We spoke for nearly an hour. I explained everything, how I had been paying for everything, how they had turned cruel, how they dared to call me that word. Mr. Clay listened, then chuckled softly. Margaret, they have no idea how foolish they've been. You own that house free and clear. You can do whatever you want with it. Sell it, rent it, kick them out. Legally, they have no ground. A small, wicked satisfaction bloomed in my chest. For years, they treated me as though I needed them. The truth was the opposite. Without me, they had nothing. Let's draw up some papers, I whispered. That evening, I watched them around the dinner table. Brittany scrolled through her phone, Daniel shoveled food into his mouth without a word, the children argued about a toy. I sat silently, my fork poised, but my mind elsewhere. I saw them out of my house, their bags packed, their faces pale with shock. I saw myself standing taller than I had in years, holding the deed in my hand like a sword. After dinner, Daniel tossed another bill toward me. Due in 3 days, he said, without looking up. I picked it up gently, folding it once, then twice. I smiled. Don't worry. I'll take care of it. And I did. But not the way they thought. The next week, I began preparing in secret. I visited the bank, withdrawing small amounts of cash, stashing it away. I contacted a realtor about rental properties in town. Just curious, I told her. Something cozy, maybe 1 bedroom. I also began keeping records, copies of every bill I'd paid, notes of every cruel comment, even photographs of their shopping bags and Brittany's nail appointments. Evidence, not for a court of law, but for myself. A reminder that my revenge wasn't petty, it was justice. Brittany noticed me more than once scribbling in a notebook at the kitchen table. What's that? She asked one afternoon, narrowing her eyes. Oh, just a journal, I said, closing it with a smile. Helps me pass the time. If only she knew. The turning point came one Saturday morning. Daniel and Brittany decided to throw a barbecue in the backyard. They invited their friends, loud, brash people who left beer bottles on my flower beds and stomped cigarette butts into the grass Henry had once tended so carefully. I stood at the kitchen window, watching as they laughed and carried on, never once inviting me to join. At one point, I heard Brittany's voice rise above the noise. Can you believe she just sits in that house all day? We're the ones keeping this place going. Her friend laughed. Sounds like dead weight to me. Brittany grinned, her eyes flicking toward the window. Exactly. A parasite. The group roared with laughter. My heart cracked, but instead of crumbling, I felt something stronger surge through me. Anger. Cold and sharp. They had made a joke out of me, stripped me of dignity, but they had no idea their time was almost up. That night, when the house was quiet, I walked into the living room. The moonlight streamed through the curtains, casting shadows across the photographs on the mantel. Pictures of Henry, of Daniel as a boy, of family holidays long gone. I traced a finger along the glass frame of Henry's portrait. Don't worry, I whispered. I won't let them win. The eviction papers were ready. Mr. Clay had sent them, crisp and undeniable. They sat in a manila envelope in my dresser drawer, heavy with promise. Every time I touched them, I felt a thrill of power. But I wasn't ready to hand them over just yet. Not until they pushed me one step further. Not until the moment was so perfect that the shock would slice deeper than any insult they'd ever thrown my way. And that moment came sooner than I expected. One evening, after another long day of cleaning and cooking, I set a plate of food in front of Daniel. He didn't even glance at it. Instead, he looked at Brittany and smirked. You know, maybe Mom should start paying rent if she's going to keep living here. She can't expect us to carry her forever. Brittany snickered. Rent? For what? She doesn't even own this place. My grip tightened on the edge of the table. My pulse roared in my ears. This house, my house, built with Henry's sweat and my patience, was suddenly claimed as theirs in their minds. And that was it. That was the final straw. I excused myself quietly, went to my room, and pulled out the envelope. I ran my hand over the bold letters, notice to vacate. The revenge I had so carefully planned was about to unfold. Tomorrow, I would hand them the papers. Tomorrow, they would learn exactly who the parasite was. Morning sunlight spilled through the blinds the next day, golden streaks across the worn carpet. I sat at the dining table with a steaming cup of coffee, the manila envelope resting just inches from my hand. I traced the edge of it, my fingers trembling, not with fear, but anticipation. The eviction notice had weight beyond paper and ink. It was justice bound into crisp folds. I thought of Henry again, his calloused hands tightening bolts, his tired smile after long shifts. He would never have let our son talk to me the way Daniel had. He would have never allowed his wife to toss my dignity out like trash. Henry had been proud of me, proud of the home we built together. This house was his legacy, and I refused to let it become my prison. That evening, I set the table as usual. Roast chicken, garlic potatoes, green beans snapped fresh from the market. The children bounded in, chattering loudly, Brittany scolding half-heartedly as she scrolled through her phone. Daniel trudged in last, loosening his tie, eyes glazed with exhaustion or indifference. We sat, and before the first bite was taken, Daniel tossed another bill across the table. The corner of the paper landed in my plate, smearing grease onto the numbers. He didn't even notice. You know the drill, he muttered. Something inside me snapped, quiet and clean, like a rope breaking after years of strain. I set down my fork, folded my hands calmly, and looked at both of them. You know, I began, my voice steady, for all the bills I pay, for all the meals I cook, for all the laundry I fold, you'd think I'd at least get a thank you. Brittany snorted. We didn't ask you to do all that. You choose to. And honestly, it's not enough. You should be grateful we let you stay here at all. Her words hit the table like venom, poisoning the air. Grateful. Let me stay. I smiled then, so calm it startled even me. I reached beneath the table, slid out the envelope, and placed it between the salt and pepper shakers. Funny you should say that. Daniel frowned, his brow creasing. What's this? Open it, I said softly. Brittany rolled her eyes but snatched it up. She tore the seal, unfolded the papers, and her smug expression froze. Her mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. Daniel leaned over, his eyes scanning the bold letters, notice to vacate. The silence stretched until even the children stilled. What the hell is this? Daniel's voice was sharp now, panicked. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands neatly in my lap. That, my dear son, is your notice. You have 30 days to pack your things and leave my house. Brittany slammed the paper down. Your house? This is Daniel's house. We've been. No, I interrupted, my tone firm. This house is mine. Paid for in full by your father and me. The deed is in my name, and it always has been. Every bill you've handed me, every insult you've thrown, Parasite, deadweight, I kept quiet. But no more. Daniel's face turned red. He looked from me to the paper and back. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. The children's eyes darted between us, wide and confused. Brittany's hands trembled as she tried to gather her composure. You wouldn't do this. You can't just kick us out. Oh, but I can. I let my voice drop, low and deliberate. And I am. The weight of my words crushed the room into silence. For the first time in years, I felt taller, stronger. No longer their doormat. Daniel shoved back his chair, his jaw clenched. You'd throw your own son into the street? You already threw me into the trash, I whispered, my gaze steady. I'm just returning the favor. The words sliced him open. He flinched as though I had struck him. Brittany recovered first, venom dripping from her tongue. You'll regret this. We'll take you to court. Daniel's your son, you owe him. I laughed then, a sound that startled even me. It wasn't bitter, it was triumphant. Court? Go ahead. You'll lose. Mr. Clay made sure of that. You see, I own this home. And you? You've been living here on my goodwill. Which has just run out. Daniel's shoulders sagged. He ran a hand over his face, defeated. Brittany looked at him, searching for a fight that wasn't there. The children began to cry softly. My heart twisted for them, innocent in this storm. But I knew, they'd be better off somewhere else, away from the rot their parents carried. I stood then, gathering the plates. My hands no longer shook. Dinner's over, I said quietly. You have 30 days. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the sounds of muffled arguments bleeding through the walls. Brittany's shrill voice, Daniel's angry mutters. They were scrambling, already tasting the fear of losing their safety net. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. Over the next week, their behavior shifted. Brittany suddenly tried being polite, offering me tea, complimenting my dress. Daniel mowed the lawn without being asked, fixed a leaky faucet, even muttered a half-hearted thanks when I handed him his lunch. But it was too late. The wound had festered too long. Their sudden kindness was a mask, and I could see the desperation underneath. Parasite. The word still echoed, sharper than their forced smiles. I kept my distance, moving with quiet efficiency. I visited the bank again, arranged meetings with a realtor, even toured a small apartment across town. A little place with sunshine pouring through the windows and a balcony for my flower pots. Freedom. Each night, I checked the calendar. 30 days ticked closer. Their panic grew. I could feel it in the air, see it in the way Daniel stared at the papers still pinned to the refrigerator, the bold letters reminding him of the countdown. One evening, Brittany cornered me in the hallway, her lips painted too red, her perfume cloying. Listen, she hissed. We'll make it worth your while. Daniel can give you some money every month if you just tear those papers up. You can stay here and we'll. No. My answer was sharp, clean. I looked her in the eye. You don't get to buy me off. You laughed when you threw my dinner in the trash. Do you remember that? Her face blanched, her words faltering. I do, I said, stepping past her. And I'll never forget it. Her voice followed me down the hall, shrill and shaking. You're destroying your own family. I paused at my bedroom door, glancing back. No. I'm saving myself from the people who already destroyed me. And with that, I shut the door. The days that followed were unlike anything I'd seen in this house. The air grew thick with tension, every corner buzzing with arguments and whispered plans. 30 days, it sounded like plenty of time, but I could see the panic on their faces with each sunrise. Daniel spent long nights at the dining table, hunched over his laptop, spreadsheets glowing on the screen, bills scattered like confetti. I'd catch him muttering numbers under his breath, rubbing his temples until his skin turned red. His paycheck alone couldn't cover rent anywhere near the lifestyle they had grown used to. Without my steady payments, their castle turned into sand. Brittany grew sharp-edged. She snapped at the children more often, slammed cabinet doors, stormed around in heels that clacked like gunshots on the hardwood. She still tried now and then to soften me, sweet tea delivered to my room, a smile too wide, a tone too sugary. But her eyes betrayed her, flashing anger and fear. She wanted to curse me, but she needed me. And that dependence was rotting her from the inside. I, on the other hand, felt lighter. For the first time in years, I didn't cook every meal. I didn't rush to pay every bill. I didn't scold myself for being unappreciated. Instead, I sat on the porch in the evenings, rocking slowly, sipping tea while the sun dipped low. The flowers Henry and I had planted bloomed around me, their fragrance a reminder of gentler days. I breathed it in, letting peace replace years of bitterness. But make no mistake, I wasn't merciful. The eviction papers pinned to the fridge were a clock, ticking loud enough for them to hear in their sleep. 2 weeks in, Brittany tried again. She cornered me in the kitchen, her lipstick smeared, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her designer purse. "Margaret, please. Think about the children. They'll be devastated if we have to move. Do you really want to traumatize them?" I stirred sugar into my tea, calm as still water. "Did you think about traumatizing them when you laughed and threw my dinner in the trash? They saw you. They heard you. What lesson did that teach them?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. I stepped closer, my voice cold. "Children learn by example. And now they'll learn another lesson: actions have consequences." She left the room in a storm, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Daniel tried a different approach. One night, he sat across from me at the table, no bill in hand, no anger in his tone. "Just quiet. Mom," he began, his voice rough, "I messed up. I let Brittany talk, I let things go too far. But you're my mother. I never should have allowed this. Please, can't we work something out?" For a moment, my chest ached. This was my son, the boy I had held through fevers, the young man I had cheered for at graduations. His eyes were tired, his face lined with stress. I wanted to forgive. I wanted to reach out, stroke his cheek, and tell him it would be all right. But then the memory stabbed through, his voice calling me a burden, his silence as Brittany called me a parasite. He had let it happen. He had laughed too. I shook my head slowly. "I gave you every chance, Daniel. More than you deserved. You chose your wife's scorn over your mother's respect. And now you live with the choice." His shoulders sagged, and for the first time, I saw shame flicker across his face. The countdown continued. With 10 days left, they grew desperate. Boxes began to appear in the hallway, hastily packed and half-labeled. Brittany cried on the phone to her sister, her voice carrying through the thin walls. "She's actually doing it. She's throwing us out. We have nowhere to go." At night, I heard them fight. Brittany accused Daniel of being weak. Daniel shouted about her greed, their voices clashing until one of the children sobbed and begged them to stop. The house I had built with love now echoed with their bitterness. And I let it happen. Because they had to feel it. Every ounce of what they had given me, they had to taste it themselves. On the 29th day, the storm broke. Brittany stood in the doorway of my room, her eyes wild, her hair tangled, her hands balled into fists. "You think you've won, don't you?" she spat. "You've ruined everything. Daniel, the kids, me, you've destroyed this family." I set down the book I'd been reading and met her gaze. "No. You destroyed this family the moment you disrespected me in my own home." Her lips curled. "You'll die alone, you bitter old hag. And when you do, nobody will care." For a moment, her words cut deep. The loneliness of age, the empty chair where Henry should have been, the years of giving only to be discarded, they pressed in on me. But then I saw her trembling hands, her desperate eyes. This wasn't victory for her. It was defeat wearing a mask. I smiled softly. Better to die alone than to live surrounded by vipers. Her face twisted in fury, and she stormed out. The next morning, I stood at the front door as the moving truck pulled away. Daniel didn't look back. Brittany sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, her face pale with rage. The children waved weakly through the window, their little faces pressed against the glass. My heart broke for them, but I knew they would learn. Someday, they'd understand why I did what I did. When the dust settled, the silence of the house wrapped around me like a blanket. For the first time in years, it was mine again. No insults, no slammed doors, no tossed dinners. Just me, my memories, and Henry's spirit lingering in the walls. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of tea, and sat at the table. The eviction notice still hung on the fridge, its job complete. I smiled, leaned back, and whispered to the empty room, "Justice, Henry. At last." But revenge has a way of rippling further than you expect. And deep down I knew, this wasn't the end. The house was mine again. Quiet, peaceful, whole. For the first week after they left, I wandered through the rooms like a woman rediscovering her own skin. The silence was comforting. No harsh voices. No insults dripping like acid. Just the creak of old wood floors and the hum of the refrigerator. I cooked for myself, small meals I enjoyed without fear of them being tossed away. I played Henry's old records, letting the warm notes fill the air. I even planted a fresh row of marigolds in the garden, their golden heads turning toward the sun as if to bless the freedom I'd fought for. But life has a way of sending reminders. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mailbox. Legal stationery. Daniel and Brittany had filed to contest ownership of the house, claiming that since Daniel was my son, he had rights to it. My hands trembled as I opened it, but not with fear, no, with rage. They had learned nothing. I drove straight to Mr. Clay's office, the lawyer who had helped me prepare the eviction. His office smelled of leather and old books, the kind of room that made you feel safe. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the paperwork, and let out a short laugh. "They don't have a case," he said firmly. "This house has been in your name since it was purchased. Daniel's inheritance will only come when you're gone. And even then, you decide what happens to it. Until then, he has no claim." Relief washed through me. But then a sharper thought followed, curling in my chest like smoke. Why wait until I was gone to settle things? Why not take back full control now, so there could never be another challenge, another insult? That night, I pulled out Henry's old desk drawer and found the faded will we'd drawn up years ago. It still listed Daniel as the primary heir. My stomach twisted. The boy who had mocked me, who had allowed his wife to humiliate me, would one day take everything Henry and I had built. Over my dead body. The next morning, I called Mr. Clay again. We drew up a new will, one that would stand ironclad against any challenge. Daniel and Brittany would get nothing. Not a dime, not a chair, not a flower from the garden. Instead, the house, the savings, and every last belonging of mine would go into a trust for the grandchildren alone, released when they were old enough to live apart from their parents' poison. The pen felt heavy as I signed the papers, but oh, how satisfying. It was not spite. It was justice. The children deserved better than the example Daniel and Brittany set. And if cutting out my son completely was the price of ensuring that, so be it. Weeks passed, and word of the new will trickled back to them. I didn't have to ask how. They stormed up my driveway one evening, their faces thunderclouds. Brittany was the first to explode. "How dare you? You cut us out of everything? After all we've done for you." I laughed bitterly. "Done for me? You mean the insults? The laughter while you threw my dinner away? The word parasite on your tongue?" Daniel stepped forward, his voice low, almost pleading. "Mom, this is too far. You can't just erase me from your life." I met his eyes, and for a moment I almost saw my boy again, the little boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard, who used to curl into my lap. But then I remembered how easily he had stood by while Brittany shredded my dignity. He had chosen his side long ago. "I didn't erase you, Daniel," I said softly. "You erased yourself the day you let your wife call me a parasite. The day you tossed my worth into the trash with my dinner." His jaw tightened, his eyes glassy. He wanted to argue, but there was nothing left to say. Brittany, however, never knew when to stop. She sneered, her voice sharp as broken glass. "You'll regret this, old woman. When you're sick and helpless, who will take care of you? Your precious papers won't keep you company." I smiled, calm and steady. "I'd rather die alone in dignity than live surrounded by your cruelty." The silence that followed was heavy. Even Daniel couldn't meet my gaze. Finally, they turned and left, their footsteps crunching down the driveway, their voices hissing in angry whispers as they climbed into their car. I stood on the porch long after their taillights disappeared. The night air was cool, the crickets singing. For the first time in decades, I felt truly free. But my revenge wasn't only in the eviction or the rewritten will. It was in reclaiming my peace, in knowing that the power they thought they held over me was gone forever. They had laughed while discarding me, reducing me to nothing. And now, they had nothing to show for it. The children visited me sometimes after school. They'd sit at the kitchen table, their small hands wrapped around cups of cocoa, their voices soft as they asked about the flowers or the old family photos. I didn't speak ill of their parents, I didn't need to. Someday, they would see the truth with their own eyes. For now, I gave them what I could: warmth, safety, and love. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in gold and pink, I whispered to Henry's picture on the mantel. I kept our home safe. I kept our memory alive. They'll never destroy me again. The house seemed to sigh with me, the walls no longer heavy with bitterness. I had endured betrayal, but I had turned it into justice. They had called me Parasite. But in the end, I was the root, the foundation, the soil that outlasted them all. And that was my sweetest revenge.